Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, TuneIn, and Spotify by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please go to the iTunes store, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. That'll inspire Apple to promote us a little. And of course, you can also promote us by telling people about the podcast on social media or however else you publicize the things you like. You can support the Virtual Memories Show and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/vmspod and set up your level of support. You'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/vmspod or paypal.me/vmspod and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. All right, there's not much going on in my day-to-day that I can actually share with you, except to let you know that I'm over last week's head cold. I have taken up running, but just a little, and I've sort of started an online detox program. And I'll give you more details about that in this week's show email, which you really ought to subscribe to at either VMSpod or chimeraobscura.com/vm. Now, my guest this week is David Lloyd, the British cartoonist and publisher. In the U.S., David's best known for his 1980s collaboration with Alan Moore on the comic book V for Vendetta, which got made into a movie in 2005. The lead character in the comic and the movie wore this stylized Guy Fawkes mask, and interestingly, the mask got co-opted by the Occupy and Anonymous movements following the financial crash in 2008. I will admit, of the things I like and don't like about how my comic-driven youth has now infected the entire world, that ranks on the awesome scale, while all of the superhero movies, not so much. That's just me. Anyway, V was a long time ago. Like I said, it was done primarily in the 1980s, and David's had quite a career since then, drawing a ton of comics, producing his own graphic novel, a book called Kickback, and now publishing an online comics anthology magazine called Aces Weekly. Now, Aces Weekly runs on subscriptions for 7-issue series, and each issue contains stories by this amazing variety of comics creators, with some serials and some shorter work. It's been running since 2012, and they're up to 34 volumes at this point, which is kind of amazing. You can check it out at acesweekly.co.uk. Now, more info at the end of the episode. Just search for Aces Weekly, and that'll be the first thing that comes up. Now, David's been working as the publisher of Aces Weekly pretty much full-time, which I did not realize when we started talking. That is, I thought he still had time to work on his own comics, but that's not the case. So that's why I sound as stupid as I do at the beginning about asking what he's working on. But David's had an amazing career. He's worked with a ton of different companies, some of the best writers around. Now, we met up at a Comic-Con in New Jersey in April, and I pitched him on recording sometime down the road, maybe my next England visit. He replied, "I'll be in New York through next weekend." So I made him the final guest in my 4 podcasts and 3 boroughs in one day extravaganza from last April. So that also plays into my vocal tone and some of the aspects of this episode. I will warn you in advance, this is a weird conversation. That is, I was interested in David's roots and his perspectives on comics publishing and storytelling over 40 plus years that he's been working in it. We don't get to his work with Alan Moore for a very long time in this episode, and there is some really good stuff about it, as well as how he felt about seeing the V mask become a symbol for those groups. But we do get to it. It does take a while. I think you'll dig it. Now, as caveats go, we recorded in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, so lots of sirens. That's basically the big caveat. Sorry. Here's a bio for David. David Lloyd is the well-known illustrator and co-creator of V for Vendetta and the publisher of Aces Weekly. His other work includes Hellblazer, Aliens, Marlowe, Global Frequency, War Stories, and the acclaimed crime thriller Kickback. In recent years, he's worked on a volume of war memoirs, Words of Stars, an Asterix collection, his first limited edition print, The Prize Fighter, and a book on Sao Paulo. Dark Matter, a retrospective of his past stories, has been published in Italy and Spain. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with David Lloyd. Oh, and we start out with him talking about maybe seeing Alan Bellman on the streets of New York City. Alan is a 90-plus-year-old cartoonist who drew Captain America in, like, the 1940s. So that's the context.
When I was walking down, it was 6th Avenue, a couple of days ago, I saw some guy on one of those walkers, coming along very, very slowly. It was a hot day, it was going on. And he had his head down and he had a sort of like baseball cap on. He was like, and I looked at him and I thought, and for 1 minute I thought it was him, and I thought, and I, part of his facial features, it's not often because, when guys get old, their facial features actually become similar.
Yeah.
Well,
as George Orwell said, at 50, we all have the face we deserve. This is much older than 50. I'm sure.
Yeah, but this, he's like, Alan Bellman is great, and you should interview him, because the thing is, he says he does all the Comic-Cons, and he says, this is what keeps me out of the rocking chair, David. If I wasn't doing this, this keeps me going. And so that's why he does all these cons. And but the thing is, I thought it was him, and I let him go by, and I was, I thought, wait a minute, I should go and stop and say, hey, is that you, Alan? But I wasn't confident enough to do it.
Yeah.
But in a sense, I wish I was. I wish I had, because he might have been in New York for some time. But if he was in New York staying or something, he wouldn't have been on that. Yeah,
he wouldn't have had his
yeah, because that's the sort of like the comfortable thing that, you have at your home and thing. And but I still don't know. I actually looked at his Facebook page.
I was going to ask if he had a presence on Facebook. You might be able to figure out
he's on Facebook. I looked at his Facebook page and I said, when in about, you sometimes get, lives in.
Right.
But it was only from. All he had was from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to check with him.
Yeah. I was going to say, you look for a status update, see if he's posting anything that implies, life up here. But
yeah, I didn't. It was nothing that did when I saw it.
That's the problem.
And I would have to tell him that I did see,
a guy who
not that he looked
like you.
Looked old and decrepit like you.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You got to tread that line.
No, I'll just say, I thought somebody go.
Just could have sworn I saw you.
Yeah,
during my New York trip.
I saw this guy that looked a bit like you.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm almost convinced, unless I don't know. But anyway, it was like very strange to sort of like see him. And it would have been an extraordinary situation because he would have been there at exactly the same time as I was here.
Yeah.
And Well,
Life
anyway,
works
I'm just rambling.
The weird coincidences in people's lives and how they work out. In your case, our getting together isn't coincidence because I went over that guest list for that Comic-Con and literally you were the only Chaikin I'd already recorded with. You were the only person I looked at. I'm like, I'd like to sit down with David sometime. And Gravette once mentioned that you and I need to get together. So I think Tom Spurgeon at the Comics Reporter also said something to the effect of he really enjoyed a presentation you did at San Diego.
Right.
Not knowing if you were going to be, that sort of speaker or because you've seen artists who just kind of.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, know. So between those two, I figured, I should go in and see Lloyd and, say hi to Chaikin and JJ Settlemeyer, the animator guy who I'd recorded with the previous week.
Right.
So then I make up for it by doing 4 of these in one day and running myself into the ground. So,
have you got another one after this?
No, this is the last one.
Then I go break after this.
Oh yeah, then between us, then I go to the hospital and visit my old man who's been in on and off for 2 months. So I know. That's one of his girlfriend's like, so are you coming by today? I'm like, well, I've got 4 podcasts in 3 different boroughs of New York, but after that I'll stop in. So
okay, well,
I'll probably it's he's 80. He's been bringing this on himself for years. So
well, that's it. We all some of us should be more disciplined than others, and but there you go.
You seem relatively healthy for a person who spent his career in cartooning. What is your daily art like? What do you do in terms of comics making? Well,
when I was doing comics, that's the important thing. When I was doing comics, you can get to the Aces Weekly later if you want to. That's
what I was wondering if that's differentiated from comics, but we'll get to it later. So,
well, it's not. Okay.
Yeah. What do you do by day?
Okay, by day. I mean, if you're interested, are you interested in what I used to do when I was actually writing and drawing, or what I do now as a publisher?
How has it transformed? Start with what you're doing now and how it transformed over the years.
Okay. Aces Weekly is similar in only one aspect to working on, doing drawing. And that is that after breakfast, you just get on with the job. So I've never had a studio. I know a lot of my colleagues did. I mean, Dave Gibbons famously had a studio, and Dave Gibbons is the only guy I know who, I don't know whether he still does this, but he would work like a 9 to 5. He would go out to the studio, come back home after 9 to 5, and he wouldn't even work weekends.
That was the workplace, and that was
and he didn't even do work weekends, which is like extraordinary. From a freelance point of view. But I think the thing about Dave is he's always been more organised and more technically capable. That's the best way of describing it. Because he was a chartered surveyor before he became a
that explains a lot about the perspective and scene setting of his work.
He's always been very structured and organised. So I'm, in a sense, it's not surprising that he does that. But I could never do that because, for a start, I'd see it as a distraction. Because you're basically, you're putting yourself in a situation that is kind of different and not comfortable. I mean, well, it would be comfortable for Dave. It was, but for me, it's very important for me to concentrate on what I'm doing. He used to share a studio with Mick McMahon. Mick McMahon is another great British artist. I don't know whether you're familiar with his work, but they used to sit and do their work and shit and talk about football. And I could never work like that because that would be like, well, wait a minute, what are you concentrating on? It's like your brain is not actually perfectly connected to your hand. And so I could never do that. I admire people that can, but I can never do that. And,
I watched when I was recording with John Cuneo, this illustrator, last year, he was doing video in front of university classes where he would be doing the drawing while explaining to them what he was doing. I have no drawing skill whatsoever, but I can't conceive of actively doing that while speaking and addressing an entire room of people simultaneously. So
right.
I assume you're in that boat that the art is actually the art.
Well, no, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're telling a story, there's a degree of concentration. I mean, if you're illustrating something, of course, that's a demonstration. And you can do that. I mean, you can do a drawing and say, this is how I'm doing it. But that's separate from telling a story, from the actual art of being involved in telling a story. So I think that's a whole different thing. I mean, I could do that, and I've done things like it.
Speaking while making a drawing, a single drawing. Okay.
Yeah. Speaking while making a drawing. Yeah. Although those live things, I stay really away from those live things because I never do anything worth a damn when I do those. When they say, "Oh, get up on stage and do a drawing," well, that's going to be rubbish. That's going to be rubbish because I haven't planned it. There are artists that do fantastic stuff like that. Sergio Aragones is one.
Sure.
I mean, I remember I was where was I? In Spain once, at a convention. And I was asked to do that thing. And Sergio had finished in like no time. You have about an hour or something. And I was still struggling, thinking, what am I going to do? Is this looking any good? And
Sergio, though.
Yeah, but it wasn't just. I mean, not just Sergio. I mean, obviously Sergio's a genius. He can just knock this stuff out easy. Yes. But other artists can do.
Yeah, I think Martin,
not on a similar level, but they can produce. They will stand up there and they'll draw something. It will be good. It will look good. Whereas, in fact, I did one of those that was kind of televised a while back with. Matthias Schulteis is a German artist.
Yeah.
He's I did that with him, and who else was it? I can't remember who else was there, but it was, and we did that on television on screen, and my stuff was rubbish anyway. But the thing is, I think I survived better there.
Mm-hmm.
But
still, not your milieu. So
no, absolutely not, yeah, it's just not the thing that I like to do.
I guess rather than start with what the workday is like now, we should talk just about where you got started and where did your career begin? I guess what was because you're pretty much around the time I was born, which is a bad sign, because it means you've actually managed to survive in comics.
Well, on this point of surviving in comics, so on that point of surviving in comics, and I don't know whether you want this to ramble, but anyway.
Oh no, I'm all about the digressions.
All right, okay. On this point about surviving in comics, I learned early on, and I decided this early on, that if you were going to that it would be easy to fall into the trap of going from one job to another, paying the bills, because your bills are always going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aware that lots of artists were just working to pay the bills. Their choices were not there. They wanted to earn a living, and they had to pay the bills, and the bills come in, and that's what they have to do. So they're not making any choices. They're paying the bills with what jobs are coming in and what job is being offered to them most of the time. I saw that as happening as a trap. So early on, when I had a reputation and an ongoing career, I said to myself, right, I'm going to keep enough money in the bank so that I never have to jump to the very next job. Whatever it is. So I can choose, right? So I don't have to become a workhorse. I don't have to be on the treadmill, I mean, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose. So, I decided that. So that means that I'm not, you say you look good because in comparison to others, I've never been slave to it. There are times when I've had to sort of like phone up and say, have you got anything? And there have been a couple of years where my reputation didn't count for anything and I was looking around for things, for work to do. actually art should be an adventure. And once it ceases to be an adventure and you're not enjoying it as that, then it's done. You're you know, I mean.
And you managed to keep it an adventure?
Yeah.
Or have you stepped away when it's not?
Well, yeah, there's very few instances where I felt, oh, you know, I don't like this. And well, that from the earliest days, I saw that situation where you were given things that you had to do. And, you know, but that's only happened, well, once actually.
Mm-hmm. How did you get started? What was your comics upbringing?
Okay.
How did you find yourself?
This is going to be very long, and I don't know how much you want me to go on.
We've got time. It's okay.
All right. Okay.
If I feign death, you'll know that it went on too long. That's
all right. Okay. Okay. How did it begin? What are my comics upbringing? Okay. Well, the first comics I saw really were newspaper strips in Daily Mirror. Daily Mirror is a British newspaper that we had in our house, and so the first stuff I saw was the newspaper strips, which must have influenced me, but they didn't impress me. They didn't make me think, "Oh, I'm going to do newspaper strips like this." And the comics I had when I was a kid, before I was about 12, were the really cheapest comics. I mean, my dad didn't have much. We didn't have much money generally. I mean, my dad was on night work the whole of his life because it paid more, and so I can't say we had. So I had the cheapest comics. The classic quality comic of that period, you probably know, was something called The Eagle, which had Dan Dare, Frank Hampson, which is extraordinarily beautiful. And richer kids probably had that, but we didn't. We had the cheaper comics, which were very uninspiring. Something called Victor, which was basic. They had some war stories, some sports stories. Boring, really horrible, and no real fantasy or adventure. So that was boring stuff. But at the age of 12, I saw this incredible. I don't know whether I bought it with my own pocket money. I think it was at the point. I don't know. Anyway, there was more money available. I can't remember. Yeah. But this was a fantastic comic called Boy's World, which was produced in the same printing quality as Eagle. And it had this incredible double spread strip in the middle of it called Wrath of the Gods. This was drawn by a guy called Ron Embleton, and it was the first thing I had ever seen that I thought, well, you can make a believable world, a completely believable world, like a movie with it. It was so superb. The draftsmanship was astounding. He was a man who was classically trained. He was superb, and still to this day, I've seen nothing to equal it. Honestly, wow. And this was 62. It would have been about 62. And when I saw that, I thought, man, if you can do this, I want to try and do this. I want to be able to do this. That was in my head. That went in my head. So from that point on, at school, I was drawing comics intermittently, not all the time, and you know, my ambition, right from primary school, this was to be a commercial artist, not specifically comics or anything, just to be a commercial artist. And the reason was, well, because I was good at art. That was probably the only thing really I was really, really good at. But there was this TV show on children's television where it showed different people and what in their occupations. And they showed the deep sea diver, and he was a guy dressed in a deep sea, you know,
with a big diving bell.
Yeah, that's
hat.
right.
Yeah.
And there was another guy, like a firefighter or something. And then they actually had, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it. They actually had somebody, a commercial artist.
Was he hunched over and scrawny compared to the other two?
He wasn't. Actually, no, this is the thing. He looked cool, man. No, awesome. Because he had a sitting on a stool by a drawing board, and don't forget the commercial artists of all kinds of different kinds. The comic artist is famously overpressured and overworked.
True.
But all other comic artists, great illustrators, people doing covers for the Saturday Evening Post, all that stuff, all those guys of great profiles, and it looks good. And this guy was sitting on a high stool with a drawing board and thought, man, that looks great. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a commercial artist. And because that was what I was good at, so that's what I did. That's what I ended up doing. But if you want this I'll roll on the whole thing.
Well, just how it led into the comics career.
Well, because I was doing comics intermittently through school, and then the idea was that when I finished school, secondary school, which is high school over here. I was going to go to art college. And that was the idea, but I'm working class kid, and the careers guidance we get as working class kids is like rubbish.
Yeah.
So even though that's what I wanted to do, and I was never told that there are points of entry during the year for students for art college. Well, nobody told me that, and I missed that point of entry. Now, I was from a working class family. You don't hang around for a year.
Right. You don't get a gap year when
you don't get a gap. You don't hang around for a year. You've got to work. That's it. You left school at 16, and you've got to work. And my mum, she was great. She went to what we called in England the Youth Employment Office. And she said, look, it's my son, blah, blah, blah. What can he do? And she got an interview with me to go up to the Youth Employment Office. And I got a job as a trainee commercial artist at a place called Knighton Studios. That's Night, as in Black Night.
Yeah, the Night at the Round Table.
Oh, and yeah. Knighton Studios in a place called Carter Lane. It was next to St Paul's, Stone's Throw St Paul's, right in the middle. And I started there, and basically I was like what you call in America a gopher. Because you make the tea for the studio. It's a studio full of people doing stuff for advertising. It's all advertising art. So you make the tea for the people, and you're a messenger. You take all the artwork around to all the advertising agencies in London. So that was your job. You got on the tube, but not rarely the bus. It was always tube. You go around all these studios to printers, to advertising agencies, and you deliver that work. In the meantime, in those hours that are not filled, you learn the job, or the managing director was supposed to teach me the job, but at the end of the day, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
That was the idea. But basically, you learnt from what the other guys are doing.
Did you have to be proactive about that? Did you have to, make sure you were keeping an eye and just trying to learn?
The thing is this. I think they respond. Well,
did they take an active hand?
Well, I just learned because I was taught to a small degree by the managing director. But then I used my own initiative.
That's what I'm wondering.
And I was given jobs and said as a tryout. Okay. But you do have to use your own initiative to a certain degree, and that's what I did. But it was like I don't know how. It's very strange how that happened. Really, when you asking me that, because it's like it happened as a kind of osmosis. I think the thing is that when I was at that studio, I was doing comics, when I wasn't doing any artwork.
Your downtime.
Yeah. And I was also doing them in my lunchtimes, and I was doing them at home. So that's when I was really fast. I really wanted to do comics, and I was doing them for my own pleasure and learning because it was all great practice. So I was doing that, but I think when they saw me doing these comic strips in the studio and not doing anything else, they thought, oh, well, we've got to get him to actually do some work that we use. You know, it's like, so it actually forced them to sort of like,
if there's art happening here, it better be our art.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. So but they were really,
do you remember what sort of strips you were doing on your own?
Oh yeah, I've still got them. I mean, I've still got them. Oh man, that was, what I was doing at home was a kind of Conan story, but an intelligent Conan story, like an intelligent sword sorcery story with a character called Calgar. And he was I actually ended up doing some of that and getting money for it because I sold it to White Dwarf. I
remember that. Yeah, because I used to do gaming when I was a antisocial teen, and so White Dwarf was the magazine we were. Yeah. Oh, I know.
White Dwarf. But this was in its early days. It's in the early days. Two color cover and black and white inside, and I sold them on this strip called Calgar, which was just about a year before I actually started becoming a professional, about 75, 76. And, but he was an intelligent sword sorcery character, not sort of like, but I was doing that at home, in epics, line and wash, just telling this story. And I don't know, learning my job through practice.
Was there anyone to show you technique like that, or did you just see stuff and try to figure out how to make it like that?
No, and I have to say this, and I'm unashamed about this, really. I am a natural in telling a story.
Yeah.
Natural. I never had to study books. I mean, just for the technique itself of comics, I did get one. I got one of those big, what was those? It was a whole bunch of big art books. What were they called? Cartooning for beginners. There was an art guy, Ward somebody. I forget what his name is now. But he did a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
As a personal project. He did one on landscapes. He did one. I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, he did a whole bunch of them. And there was one that was cartooning for beginners, and it actually covered a lot of the stuff. Just very basics, very basic stuff. But I never had to study. I can tell a story. I could just do it naturally. And I'm very happy about that, because, storytelling is the central, fundamental concept in what we do. And I see so much, sort of failures of it.
Yeah.
But I never had to worry about that. So when I was but it was just the practice,
Yeah.
So I was doing that at home, right? And then at the studio, I was doing another thing called Lincoln Smith, which was about he came out of nowhere. He was like a preacher who came out of nowhere in the middle of New England, and during the witch hunts, all that stuff. And he was like God. He was like a Jesus character. But he had these powers of restoring people, but nobody knew who he was. He'd come in and then go out, and I developed a lot of that. I wrote lots of that stuff, and okay. So continuing further, letting me roll on like this. Okay,
talk about storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was at the studio, I was doing comics in the lunchtime, doing comics at home, and I developed the need. I thought I really should do this. This is really good. And the other thing about working in the studio, and this is why I'm largely self-taught in art too, because I was taught how to draw things. No drawings of people were done in this advertising studio. You drew refrigerators. You drew tea sets. You drew battery charges.
Yeah,
you drew
the product stuff.
You drew the product stuff, and you learned how to draw it, so it made it attractive, so that people wanted to buy it. I'm always saying to people, so that's why advertising art was very good to me, because you're selling an object, but when you do comics, you're selling a story. It's just, so if you learn how to sell something artistically, it's the same thing. So I was doing all this stuff at the studio, and I just thought, well, I should do this. I want to do this. So I created these newspaper strip characters. One was Lincoln Smith, which I created as another one was a James Bond character called Jim Stryker, usual Jim, James Bond type thing. Another one was Calgar, which I had adopted. And another one was John Jones. John Jones was a time traveler. He invented a machine that could allow him to time travel. And the story would be about all his adventures, getting in trouble. So I did these, and I sent them off. This is towards the end of my stint. I started in 1966, and then this would be about 1971. It would have been, because I left in 72, so it would have been 71. I did these submissions, and I sent them off to a European syndication agency. And there were these agencies in Europe that hired, and they sent it off to newspapers. It's a syndication agency like King Features and stuff like that. Anyway, and I got this fantastic letter back. It said, "Wow, this is really good stuff." I've still got those letters. I can't remember that. I can't tell you the exact lettering, the exact wording. But it was enthusiastic, and I thought, man, wow, this is great. Yeah, a really supportive letter. It was like amazing. I thought, man, this is like, wow, they obviously recognise the talent involved here, and so they're, that's it. And I had just said, I just left.
And you were like 20, 21?
20.
When were you born? Like 50?
50, that's right.
Okay, so 2021.
Yeah, so... Yeah. And I, when I think of the things I did then, I think, my God, I don't know what the hell I was doing. Because I just left. I think I gave them a week's notice. I've been there for 6 years, and they just gave them a week's notice. Oh, I'm leaving, And I was leaving on the strength of that letter. That's all there was to it. That was it. Anyway, I leave. Right, everything's good. Everything's going to be great. Then I get another letter from the agency, which is obviously written by somebody who wasn't as enthusiastic, possibly the boss. I don't know. Anyway, it was like, nice stuff, and nice to see what you're doing, and, keep us in touch. And it was like, wow. So there I am. I've given up this job. And I had two alternatives. I could either look for another job doing that, another 9 to 5, or I could do what I really wanted to do, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do strips myself. I wanted to be my own boss. I didn't want to be told what to do. Yeah. Because there were a couple of instances when I was working in the studio where I was being told what to do by somebody by somebody I didn't
respect.
No, not really. And I thought, well, why am I in this situation? And the idea of being a freelance strip artist was like, great. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? And instead of going back to a 9 to 5, I thought, well, I've just got to earn some money to pay my way. Because I'm still living at home at this time, but, you can't just live at home and, just...
bum around.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
So I thought, what am I going to do? So what I did, for 4 years, I took 2 different part-time jobs. And they were both 3-day-a-week jobs. And that let me with the other 4 days of being able to study and become better. Because I was totally aware, I'd become aware that I just wasn't good enough. I'm not talking about the storytelling. I could tell a story, heartbeat, but the artwork itself needed work. Before I took those part-time jobs, I tried to sell myself as a basic illustrator, doing illustrations of various kinds, going round to artists' agencies in London, showing them my portfolio. I got one job out of it. I got one dust jacket job out of that. Nothing else. Most of the rest of it was like, oh, well, keep trying and nice to see your stuff. And horrible, horrible. I mean, that's the one thing, when I talk to potential artists or people who are struggling, it's the one thing I say to them. I say, you've got, whatever happens, you make sure, you've got to prepare for rejection. You've got to be tough. You've got to be tough because, you're going to get that. And if you collapse through that, you're done for. So you just have to take it on the chin. And but that's really tough, and that was horrible. I mean, it's always horrible. But it wasn't for comics. It was like,
this isn't my passion anyway.
No, it wasn't my. It was just like, I just wanted to. I just wanted to get a job, and so I couldn't get a job, and so that's why I did those part-time jobs. And during that 4 years, it was like you just have to sort of like somehow phase out from your situation, because it's just like rejection. It's like that thing about rejection. You have to recognize that you have got to.
Well, I think that they talk about it in terms of visualization. Like, this isn't the scenario this is what I'm doing, to make sure I can become the person or the artist I want to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's true, visualization. But, that means you've actually got to sort of, it's like Zen or something. You've got to phase out of where you are, and find something good about where you are. But it's tough. But anyway, after 4 years, after that 4 years, I kept sending samples. During that 4 years, I was sending samples to companies in America and not getting anywhere. And just kept sending samples. And then there was a company in London called Brown and Watson, and they produced annuals. In England, you don't do that here, but in England, you have gift annuals.
Oh, I remember that. My mom's British, so I remember getting those when I'd go over. Yeah.
Okay, and they're gift annuals for TV shows, stimulated by TV shows, and stuff like that. And my first job was a complete failure, and I don't know how I survived that, but I just, again, it was like you just move out of your head into another place. The first one was it was a TV series called The Magician with Bill Bixby. Bill Bixby, they played this.
Bruce Banner, years later. Yeah.
Yes, it was Bruce Banner years later. And it was a pretty good series. And the annual, this company did an annual for it. And it was, I produced very good samples for them. I was very proud of the sample, the sketches of the characters, stuff like that. Yeah. When I came to do it, and I have no idea, I don't really think it was first job nerves. I don't know what happened, but the art I produced was lifeless. It was lifeless and horrible, and ironically, in the same book, who was doing much better work was John Bolton. John Bolton just come out of art school. And he was doing this really energetic stuff. I mean, it wasn't brilliant. He was just out of art school.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I looked, and his stuff had energy, and mine was as dead as a doornail. Dead as a doornail. And the great editor who commissioned me to do that, a guy called John Barraclough, he knew I had failed with it. And he kind of sympathised because, he took the job and which he paid for and stuff like that. But and he almost said, "Well, you come back," because I knew it was horrible, and I said, "Come back." So I did. I did come back about a year later with with more samples, it gave me a chance to do Logan's Run, Logan's Run annual. And even now, I can still look at that Logan's Run work, and it still stands up.
Yeah?
Yeah, from 1977, so it still stands up. And I don't know how I survived that initial disaster, but it's still, that Logan's Run stuff still, and I can look at it even now and say, yeah, it's good. It's not perfect, but it's good.
Yeah, you really recognize what worked.
It works. It's great, and it works. And
did it look like Michael York, or was it more generic?
No, it's not. It wasn't a movie. It was the TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Gregory Harrison and Heather. What's her name? I forget what her name was. Who played the lead or played the girl? But it was. I mean, the TV show was terrible. Yeah. Same people did Charlie's Angels, and that was terrible too. Those 70 shows were terrible. That was terrible. But actually, the stories in the book were better because they were written by Steve Moore. Steve Moore used to write all those British annual stuff. It was almost like a one-man band, and he was brilliant. He could turn his hand to anything. And the great thing about Steve, because I did a whole bunch of those annuals afterwards, he could copy the style and the characteristics of these actors and their personalities.
You sort of inhabit those for the script.
Absolutely. Really brilliant professional job. And they were all good. And the stories that I did with Steve in Logan, they were better than the TV shows. Much better. So anyway, Logan's Run, that was my big break.
Your arrival.
Yeah, that was my arrival, because once you get good samples like that, you can take them to any publisher and you're okay, because they can see what you're doing. They see you're capable. And at the time in England, there wasn't a lot of competition. I didn't, over a period of years from that point, a lot of artists came into the business, and the competition grew. But at that time, if you were good, if you had some kind of flair, that was it. So that's how I got into this.
Yeah.
Long story.
Well, I wonder, writing your own work versus drawing somebody else's script.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's still storytelling when you're working with somebody else and you're still figuring out the visual for what it all means. But how much stuff were you writing on your own at earlier in your career, or were you solely working from a... Absolutely nothing.
I was just doing...
I imagine that wasn't really an option, the writer-artist.
No, it wasn't. And that's quite... I mean, if you look at the time period, that was extremely unusual. You wouldn't... I mean, especially the English market, you wouldn't be doing that.
Even in America, like with mainstream comics, it really didn't exist. With the undergrounds, obviously, it's a different thing, but... I can't think of anything. Kirby technically writing his own stuff in the 70s, but needing some editing in the process. But can you talk a little about that in general, over not historically, but for you, what the difference between drawing from somebody else's script and writing your own? I know your main work, that Kickback from about 10, 12 years ago, was self-driven. Did you want to write more? Had you written more?
Well, yeah, because everything I did when I was a teenager was all written.
Yeah.
And it was good. I mean, it wasn't rubbish. I mean, it was good. And as I said, I did how many episodes of Calgar for White Dwarf? But no, there's no... Well... Look, if you write and draw your own stuff, you're expressing yourself entirely. And if you're capable of writing and drawing yourself, then there's no reason why you shouldn't do it, except for the bill-paying situation.
Yeah, because the economics become...
The economics, because if people are employing you because they love what you draw, and that's what's paying the bills, what are you going to do? You can't say, no, I want to write now. But that's crazy. Because
I really want to direct. Yeah, that's
direct. Yeah. Well, that's right. Well, I mean, let's see. How do I describe this? There was a certain point where people knew that I could write, and so I was asked if I wanted to do some short stories. So that's why I did some short stories for Gangland, DC's book, Gang book, anthology. Not Flinch. What's the other one? House of Secret. No, not which. What was the other one I did? Gangland. Oh, Weird War Tales.
Oh yeah.
So I did one for Weird War Tales, one for Gangland, because I was asked, well, do you want to do something? I forget. I think it was. They must have realised that I could write and said, do you want to do it? But the best time of being asked to write without initiating it myself was Dark Horse. Dark Horse had the license to do Species. They had that movie, right? They had a license to do Species, and they said to me, do you want to do Species? We can write and draw it. I said, well, okay, great, because I rarely got asked that, especially when you got a 21-page book. 21-page book. Okay, great, and I really got enthusiastic about that. I thought, yeah, wow. And you had to come up with a plot, a basic plot of what you're doing, and I came up with some good plots of that. And there was one I was going to do where Species baby was smuggled out of hospital. Anyway, it was good. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and while I was doing this, I got a call from, I forget who the editor was. Great Scott, somebody. He was a great editor. He was good. He was a good guy. And he said, "Look, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but we've lost the license to Species." I said, "Oh man." He says, "But do you want to do an Aliens instead?"
Close enough.
Oh, yeah, please. So that was the same deal. You had to come up with plots and general things, and so I did the same. And that's one of my favourite things I've ever done. Yeah. Aliens Glass Corridor. Mm-hmm. It was about basically a hired killer who gets conscience. Yeah. And I loved doing that. It was like perfect. Because I love that whole atmosphere of the first Aliens thing. That incredible claustrophobia. It's around the corner and all that sort of stuff. And actually, that Aliens book gave me an opportunity to tie in ideas from my ideas notebook. Now, I had an ideas notebook for stories that I'd scribbled in when I was at the art studio, in advertising. And what I did, if I got a title, I'd write it down and think, yeah, that makes a good story. We'll see what I can do with it. And during that time, I heard the Tannhauser legend. Made a big opera of it, Tannhauser. And I wrote that down. And I incorporated Tannhauser into this story.
Yeah.
And I thought, and this is great. And practically every short story I've done, I've used titles. I've done that.
Comes back from 20, 30 years ago?
Literally, yeah. I mean, it's like the thing I did for Gangland came from a title called Rescue Dog. It was about a dog. It was also wrapped around a movie that Sam Fuller made called White Dog. It's about a dog that is only trained to attack black people. Mm-hmm. A terrible thing, but part of.
Yeah, it existed.
Part of the racist nightmare of America. And the idea was like Rescue Dog. It was like, and I turned it round to a dog that was beaten up that was like used as sort of like a guard dog, attack dog by the mafia. But the handler treated it so badly and beat the hell out of it because it did something wrong and left it on the roadside for dead. And it's rescued by a cop. And of course, it's trained. That dog is trained to attack blues.
Yeah.
So he has to retrain it. He has to sort of like he has to de-brainwash this dog. And but you'll have to read the story because I don't want to spoil it. But anyway, what happens is it's a tragic end. And the story I did for Weird War Tales was from a thing, just a line, looking good, feeling great, which was about a kind of like a fitness thing, looking good, feeling great, and that was tied into the berserk killer concept. The people who do Maryland, those crazy people who take a gun, and it's fascinating. Actually, bought a book on that, called Berserk. It's all about berserk killers. What motivates them, and so looking good, feeling great was all about that because it was like the key, from this. From what the book says, the author of the book, it's about narcissism. All these people are resentful because they think they should be treated much better. They think they should be in a better position. And it's not just about bullying, it's about them having a higher viewpoint of themselves. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so any slight drives them crazy. And so it's about narcissism. And if you can't get what you want, and you're constantly being slighted, or you're in your head you're being slighted all the time, that's what happens. And that's where the central core of these people come from. And but anyway, that was the story I wrote about one of these berserk killers, looking good, feeling great. That came out of that notebook. Yeah. And Kickback in a sense came out of that notebook too, because that was. I loved the whole concept of a kickback, or a gun. If you fire a gun, it's got a kick.
Yeah,
sends you back. But a kickback,
it's also the money that's hidden under the table.
Yeah,
this is in reference to your own graphic novel, which is the longest thing you've written and drawn. I know
absolutely.
There's a disappointing publishing history behind it for you, but.
Oh, you've heard about that?
You've talked about that in interviews a bunch.
So, right. So you know that already.
Which I'll mention it during the introduction, but artistically, was it satisfying for you making that book?
Yeah, great, fantastic.
Yeah,
you've got complete control over it, and you do whatever you like. And that's the first time I actually used the computer.
I noticed some visual effects, especially reflections and things like that, were sort of laid in certain ways.
Yeah, and you can do things with a computer on art that you can't do any other way. Mm-hmm. There was like just one frame where, there's lots of different instances, and you can capture photo and photo effects and integrate them, which is another value. But if you do it carefully enough, it doesn't become a distraction. It doesn't alter the storytelling.
No.
But there was one frame where I was referencing a flashback to Joe Canelli's parents going into the water. They crashed through a fence into the water. Well, you can do that fence, and you can do the water. You can distance that water. So that it's almost three-dimensional, because the water is a kind of capture, or you don't even have to capture it. You can blur it or something so it looks different. And the foreground is the broken fence. Well, you can't do that in any other way.
Sure.
You literally can't do that as a drawing. You just can't. There might be some way that you figure it.
Yeah.
But basically, in realistic terms, in colour, you can't do it. And that's one of those great little things you can do. With that, but I did my own lettering on that too, computer lettering, and that was from my own typeface. Richard
Starkings?
Yes, Richard Starkings.
Okay, that's the only letterer I know with that first name. Okay,
yeah, who runs
Comicraft. Yeah.
Runs Comicraft. I asked him if he would make me a font from my own hand lettering, because I used to do hand lettering. I used to do the italicized stuff, the classic style of lettering, where you have thin verticals and strong horizontals. It's italic. But anyway, it's classic comic strip lettering. And I figured out how to do that, and I did that, and I was doing that on my own stuff, and did that on a lot of my early strips that I did short stories of. But I asked Richard if he could do my own font, because I looked at fonts that were around.
They always look terrible. I mean, during that era, especially, they always look so flat and fake compared to to when you were lettering V, for example, or Tom Orzechowski back when I was reading the X-Men as a kid. They had character and.
Well, the lettering of V, that's an interesting point, because I never lettered V.
I was going to ask.
It was three people that did it at different times.
Huh, okay.
They first started off with Jenny O'Connor. Mm-hmm. Second, then it was Steve Craddock. And then it was Alita Fell. And there was three of them did that. And Jenny, actually, Jenny's stuff was very eccentric. And but I loved it because it was human. Human stuff is not perfect. A robot is perfect. Human beings are not. So I loved that, what she was doing. Some of it was like, and sometimes, because this was an early stuff when I was doing it for Warrior, the British magazine, the early stuff. Some of it was like she'd be doing it in a rush, or But anyway, it got eccentric. But Steve Craddock, when he took it on, either because Jenny couldn't do it, I don't know what the situation. I can't remember what the situation was all the time. But Steve Craddock, he was a very good craftsman, so he actually copied the style of it, but with more discipline. Mm-hmm. But for myself, going back to what I was saying about my own, the fonts I saw when I was doing Kickback, 2000, early 2000s, they were soft. I mean, the closest one to it was something called Hush, and Dave Gibbons had done one. That it might be Hush, I forget, but they were very soft. They were soft, and I was doing a crime story.
Yeah, it's a hard-boiled.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard-boiled, and it was like it was too soft, and I just thought, well, that's just too soft. I can't use that. And I asked Richard if he'd produce a font for me, and he said, yeah. And I think I did a cover for him I did a Elephant Man cover for him.
Yeah.
As
thank you.
As the deal, yeah. And but he was very, very, very kind, Richard, great guy, Richard, and so I did a font for that. So that was the other computer element to it. Yeah. But I can really enjoyable when you could, because it was all. Okay, so there's something else. You're asking about the production of Kickback specifically. I discovered a completely new way of colouring. And I've told people about this. I say, oh, wow, well, let's try that. Anyway, the thing is, what you do black and white photocopies of the artwork, right? And then you colour them with coloured pencils. And then you use Smart Blur to turn that coloured pencil texture stuff into pure colour. Now, that means you don't have to worry about, any complications in colouring on Photoshop or anything like that, because some people have thought. But this transforms a basic, traditional, on-the-surface art stuff to pure colour, just through Photoshop. Just through Smart Blur. And, I mean, from a technical point of view, you have to save the black first. You save the black, so you put that over on a layer for the final file.
Sure.
But that was also, again, another use of the computer that I had never used before. So that was a lot of computer stuff used on it.
And you still draw on paper, right? Do you do a tablet?
I've never transferred to any kind of digital art production.
Is it something you've tried at all? Have you played with it just to see if it's?
I played with a very basic graphics tablet when I got Photoshop first of all, just to play around.
I'm sure back then it wasn't, anything comparable to paper, and it was just too slick and no pressure tends to be the thing that artists tell me.
Yeah, but it was just a very basic thing, a small thing. I was just playing around. Yeah. But I mean, I'd be very interested to do more like that. But it's time. I mean, I'd like to experiment with it, but I haven't got the time, and I don't see the point really. I mean, why? If I don't need to do something, I'll tend not to, because there's no point.
Some artists tell me that they also need to have originals because it's part of their income is selling original pages.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So tell me about Aces Weekly. Now that we've sort of touched on a bunch, although we've completely avoided the thing you're best known for in America with V for Vendetta. Yeah. But tell me, since we've already started talking about digital production and things like that, tell me about Aces, what it is and where it's going.
Okay, Aces Weekly is a completely cyberspace comic magazine. It's digital. It's essentially digital in only one sense, which is its digital delivery. Contributors can use digital tablets or traditional, scan it at 600 res, and that's what you use. As a product, it is just like any other anthology comic art magazine, except
no paper,
no print, which means that you can make it cheaper, more accessible, and for less money. Well, to say cheaper. And the contributors get more. It is not theoretical, it's practical, because that's what we do.
Yeah.
But in terms of making lots of money, theoretically, it's a perfect means of making lots of money. The reason it doesn't make lots of money is because too many people are in love with collecting in comic readership, and they want that thing. Wanting that thing and collecting a thing is something that stops the medium itself being as important as the thing. And the medium is more important than the thing.
Yeah.
But the thing has stopped that happening.
Yeah, Gravette talks about that. Like in South Korea, it's just online strips. Like the kids coming up have no attachment to paper or books. And it's just, how do you do a strip that scrolls and, fits into this world? He's amazed by some of this stuff, that it's just such a change of paradigm. But
well, that's fantastic. That is great. I never heard that from Paul. I have to talk to him about it, because that is an ideal situation. But in terms of Western consumption of it, the other thing is a hurdle for what I'm trying to do is the fact that most comics on the net are looked on as free. I mean, people do webcomics for nothing. And I'm always talking to people who do webcomics, and say, look, why are you doing
giving it
Why
away?
are you just giving it away? What are you, crazy? And I always say how easy it is. I say, look, you got PayPal, right? I don't know. If you're doing a story, okay, give them 2 episodes and say, if you want more, give me some money through PayPal, and then you can have it, right? But they don't do that. It just because so much of webcomics, it's all fun. Oh, I just love doing my story.
Yeah, there's a lack of treating it, I don't want to say professionalism, but treating it like a profession. There's a whole degree of, I just want to get likes on my Facebook feed or Twitter feed. And it's like, yeah, but other people are trying to do this,
Yeah, but it's not the professional, it's the value. They're just giving away something that's of great value. And then the other thing is that there's so much backlog manga. Now, I don't know how much of it is Korean, but there's a lot of backlog manga that people can just read through enormously. Some people, that's the only comics they read. They just free stuff on the internet.
Yeah.
And so that's a problem. But what I'm doing, if we can make it as successful as it deserves to be, it can be the future, because you can reach thousands of people without making any deals. I mean, we're doing an upgrade to the Aces Weekly site now, which means we're going to do other languages. And the first language we're going to do is Spanish, because that's widely spoken.
Yeah.
So, if we can make this really work, you're reaching thousands and thousands of people through no barriers whatsoever, and you are doing it at an extremely low cost, because you're not using repro houses, distribution, putting stuff in boxes, warehouses, shoving it around the country. You're not doing that at all. So all those costs are absolutely enormous. We're just files. The publishing house is a laptop.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be any more economic. And the art,
That's like doing this.
Yeah, and the art looks fantastic.
Yeah.
So we don't have any printing trouble, of course. We're not printing. It all looks fantastic. It all gets to people. It's the same thing. We don't do motion comics. We're not screwing with the art form, because we can. We do something, shoving sound effects. Oh, why don't we shove something? No. Because comics for decades have been telling a great story without any of that stuff. We just change the surface. So that's what we're doing. And it comes out every week. Basically, it's a weekly product comprised of episodes and some short stories. After 7 weeks, those episodes make a full story and make a volume. Then we have a 2-week break, then we start another volume. Mm-hmm. We're on volume 33 now.
Yeah.
So we've been going for quite a while, and it's full of fantastic stuff. And I really believe in it. I'm very passionate about it. And I'm passionate about it because it's new, because we can do it. It's the 21st century. If you get to the 21st century, it means you can tell great stories, great comic stories, the medium we all love, and you can tell it to more people and get it to more people and get more. It's like $10 for at least 150 pages,
right, including
extras, right? Which is a hell of a good deal. You're not going to do that. You're not going to get that from print in any manner of means. And because we're getting it out there and there's no cost, it means the contributors, because we split all the money that comes from it directly to the contributors, and there are at least 6 stories in every volume. So sometimes 12, basically 6 contributors, because they employ
they're the lead,
their own collaborators, yeah. And that's just split between them. That's split between those people, and our subscription manager, because he was co-founder. So that's $7. But it's like all that money goes to the contributors, and there's no other ridiculous cost, because we're publishing from a laptop. It's like simple. We're just sending files through the ether. That's through cyberspace. And it's like, it costs nothing to do that. Nothing, literally. Well, a little bit. Yeah. But it's like nothing. And we use PayPal. Of course, there's a little fraction that comes with PayPal.
Right,
we use PayPal. Yeah. It's a very simple portal. Everybody knows that. You can set up an ongoing subscription, or you can come to the website and buy back volumes. And they're all $10 each.
Right. And
also we're on Comixology. I have to say we're on Comixology too, because we've got 18 volumes on Comixology. So if you want to read it on a bus, because the way Aces Weekly operates, you have to be connected.
Okay. So you can't download the standalone.
Yeah, but if you want to read it on the bus, you can go to Comixology and get 18 volumes. We feed them to Comixology, but not very fast. We feed them.
Yeah, you got to hold back.
Because I want people to come on the website, because the trouble with Comixology,
it's another source that has to get a cut. That's
a big cut. That's 50%. They take 50% of the cover price.
That's you're going back to distributor and retailer mode.
There you go.
No, I just mean it's there, so that becomes a
exactly. It's just like the same thing.
How tough was it pitching artists and writers to join this? You know, when you I should really ask, did you begin the concept of Aces Weekly, or was it, whose idea was it initially, and how did you pitch it?
Okay, well, that's the story behind that is this. I was in San Diego in 2011, and when I was in Artist Alley, he's a digital pioneer of comics. He did the first. Say
Mike Sayans.
He did the first Batman. That used software.
Yeah, I remember that.
Pepe Moreno.
That's it. I was going to say it was a Latino name.
Yeah, Pepe Moreno. And Pepe, if you're hearing this, forgive me. Pepe came up to me and he said he was interested. He was telling me about this thing, this website that he had where he was putting, and he said, I'm telling. And I said, well, why are you doing this? And I said, he said, look, he did this book for a publisher. And it was one of those back-end deals. And when Pepe went to the publisher, after the book had been printed and distributed and everything like that, he went to the publisher and said, okay, here I am. Hello, where's my cut? Okay. And the publisher said, Pepe, I'm really sorry about this. I'm really, really, really sorry. But
marketing costs and
he said, there's nothing left. He said, what do you mean? There's nothing left. I did this book. I did all the work for this book. Well, I'm sorry, it's just one of those things, it was a back-end deal, and, we had to promote it, and and that led Pepe to think, right, okay, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is like insane. All these costs can be avoided.
Yeah. And
he set up his own website, the name of which escapes me right now.
We'll put it in the show notes.
But it's still around. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting idea. He's just putting comics on the web, cut out all those ridiculous costs. So when I came back to England, I thought, well, I should do that. I know some guys, I know some people. I'd like to put a kind of anthology together. Try it out. We'll put an anthology together, and we'll put it out, and we'll see if anybody's going to pay for it. Running up the flag post, as they say.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I was going to do, and the initial plan was to me to put it on Pepe's site, and then, but I had to get an editor to help me with it because it was going to be. I recognised it was going to be a big thing to do all this. So and there was a guy called Bambos Georgiou, who's a friend of mine. It's a Greek name. I'll spell it out for you. He used to be an editor at Marvel UK, and I've known him for a long time, and he's a great editor. And I said, look, Bambos, you want to help me with this and, be part of it? And he said, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. But anyway, when we discussed it, we decided that really the best thing was for me to have a brand, not to put it on anybody else's site.
Yeah.
Because, we were doing something that was like going to be fresh, and I had a reputation, and so let's have a brand. So we thought up the idea. We wandered through various names, and we didn't want anything that actually said comics, because comics has such baggage. You know what I mean? We wanted something that talked about the quality of it. Aces Weekly was like that was the thing. Aces. Aces means top class staff and good guys. And actually, when it came to branding, because I actually wanted a registration mark as well. I wanted, because if you got a brand, you want to protect it.
Yeah.
It was very expensive to get that brand. You have to go through a trademark attorney who I knew, who I got to know. He was a great guy and helped me out. And so we ended up with eventually getting registered, and also in the European community. So I don't know. I'm going to have to sort of figure out what's going to happen if we leave that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
You got your Brexit.
Yeah, but anyway, that's what happened there, and
the artists were interested.
Yeah, well, okay. So you asked about how I got it set up like that. That was the thing. But I've got a great reputation. I know lots of people. And people trust me. This is good. So I could ask all the guys I know. Yeah. And the basic idea was that we would start it off with names. Because if you're using great names and they've already got a fan base, you can
draw right in.
Draw right in. Did that happen? No. Because that need for a thing. So even though we had all these people who had great fan base, across, put them all together in the initial stuff, and you think, oh, great, well, that's it, we're fixed, no, because they want that thing. Yeah. They want that thing.
Something to put on their shelves.
Yeah,
something they can bring to you at a con and have you sign.
Yeah, well, that's I think that's part of the thing. Okay, but I think that's a side issue, really, that whole thing, because there is actually absolutely nothing stopping any contributor of Aces Weekly doing
from printing their own,
doing prints. Yeah. If they want something that represents their work, and actually some of them do now. Mm-hmm. Some of our later contributors do. They do prints of what they've done, and they sell them. And they also sell Aces Weekly through code cards. Code cards are our way of giving a whole volume at a convention.
Yeah.
Through cards that have a code on them.
Yeah. You go fill this out
access.
On the website, it'll get you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can give them that, and they cost $10, like any other volume would. And you can give them a print as well. So it gives them, they've got something. That's up to individual contributors, those who do it. There's a few who have done that. But that's, that whole thing about having something to sign is like what do they call it? Side issue, because something that can be fixed easily.
I just mean that sense of having a physical thing, like you said, it's a collectible. It's still part of the comics thing. Kickback I read online. I read it as a Kindle.
Good, that's great. You got it from Sequential,
from Amazon itself. Amazon sells it as the Kindle edition, at least in the U.S. Of the book, because the print version isn't very findable. So I was like, well, if I want to read this, I better get, and reading it on a 10-inch tablet and reading all this, the page size is just fine.
Yes, exactly.
It looks good. So it's just different technology. Seeing how we adjust to that stuff is sort of the challenge, both as creators and readers, I guess. Yeah,
that's another whole different element to what we're doing with Aces, because when I talk to people about this, and they say, "Oh yeah, but the young people are just like they don't mind about comics on the net. It's like the older guys that still want this collectible thing, and all the kids are playing sort of computer games. So they're not. So you should be all right." And I say, "Yeah, but what you don't understand is this: the collectible thing is still important to the younger comic readers.
Yeah,
most of the indies and all the small press, the mini comics." They're all done by young kids. They're all done by people like under 25 or something, And also the other thing, from a point of view of Aces Weekly, in terms of subscription, younger kids haven't got a stable income to give us a subscription, right? So our demographic has to be somebody who's actually got a stable income. So they often tend to be older than the demographic is it's really it's not a perfect answer to any of this. It's
a work in progress.
It is a work in progress, and I think I know this much about what we're doing with Aces Weekly. We have a stable subscriber base. It's not a big subscriber base, but it's a stable subscriber base. Now, all those people have been with us for a long time, right? You get people go.
Yeah,
that's
in
just what happens.
Yeah.
Now, all I have to do is multiply that. We're a unique product, but all I have to do is multiply that, right? So that shouldn't be tough. But I hire promoters. I say to, because I can't do everything myself. I try and get people to sort of like who put their hands up and say, "Oh, I can do this. I can help you with that." And they're always failing. They're always failing because they don't recognise the uniqueness of what we're doing. They see it as an ebook or something, or then they're working from what they know, not from what they can discover.
Yeah. Like it's a one-time sale. They're thinking of it as
well. However they're thinking of it, they have access to the website and they see what we do. So they see.
But if you're still coming from the framework of $10 transaction as opposed to $1 subscription,
exactly,
and it comes through, you're going to approach it in the wrong way and you're going to market it the wrong way. Not that I'm offering to become your next marketing manager, but I'm just circling the stuff in my head to figure out.
Yeah, the thing is, I sympathise with their confusion, but if you don't recognise what we're doing as unique, then you can't sell it because it's literally a unique product in all kinds of ways, and there's no way we couldn't make it not unique. I mean, some of the an anthology in itself, right? In comics, generally, anthologies are not recognised as good sellers. This is common.
Yeah,
this is common knowledge.
Fantagraphics is trying it again now.
Well, good luck to them. I mean, that's great. I'm glad to hear it.
But it's one of those things where you have to really make the commitment.
Yeah. But the thing is, an anthology is the only way you can do something like this. Yeah. Because this comes out weekly. This is a weekly product. And so you have to have 6 different people producing it at the same time. If you were doing something like some other digital books where it's like a writer and artist with a 21-page book and you send it off later. Well, you've got people waiting. You can't, that's going to be, they're going to be waiting for a month or something or more. Because, a 21-page comic book takes more than a month. A weekly product, a constant weekly product, a weekly entertainment. It's like the Sunday Pages. It's exactly like the Sunday Pages. True. And I always describe Basis Weekly as like the Sunday Pages because you have this great mix. You've got Prince Valiant, you've got, Juliet June Jones, you've got Mary Perkins, and then you've got Hagar the Horrible. Literally, you've got this it's a great weekly fest of comics, and then you wait for the next episode. Well, you couldn't do that if it wasn't an anthology.
Yeah,
you couldn't produce a periodical, a regular periodical,
relying on a single creator. Again, it's not Charles Dickens. You're not doing one serialized story.
Yeah.
Did you think you were going to become this, say businessman, but publisher when you were? At what point in your career did you see that? Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to take the means of production and figure this out for myself. Was it really that 2011, 2012 stretch with Pepe?
It was
had you considered it previously?
I didn't. Well, I don't know. Let me see how this. I didn't actually think, okay, I'm going to give up drawing and writing, or drawing and writing, and just become a publisher. I didn't think that. It just happened to be the fact that I knew I'd not be able to do both at the same time. Mm-hmm. I did one story. My last thing that I wrote and drew was something called Valley of Shadows, which is in the first volume.
Right.
That's the only thing I've done since. I've done nothing else. And sometimes people ask me, well, wait a minute, you missed that? I mean, you did that for years. And I can't answer that, except that I don't miss it. I think it's probably because I'm still being creative. I'm actually still producing I'm creating great stuff that gets to the readers. And I'm very proud of it all because, there's some great stuff. We've published some great stuff. And so I'm very proud of that. So I think that's that that fulfills my creative need.
Okay.
But I haven't got a perfect answer to that. I don't feel the need to tell any more stories.
That's what I guess is my other question. If you felt like, wow, there's a story I really want to do, would you be able to hand off aces for a little while to
Well, the only thing I want to stop aces for a while is because I need to move, and that's going to take up some time.
Yeah.
But no, I think if I hadn't done lots of different stories already, I've done all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And most of it gravitates towards sort of like the dark side. It's true. It's sort of like heavy drama.
Yeah, where does that come from for you? Were you reading hard-boiled crime when you were growing up?
I did.
Style,
yeah, I did.
It has that very, very, I want to say realist, but in a way that almost caricatures reality. You know how to describe your own cartooning far better than I could. But.
Well, for a start, sometimes in interviews people ask for the influences, and I've got a whole long list which covers, movies, literature, and everything. It's like everything from. I read Mike Hammer. I read that stuff. It wasn't actually Mike. It was Mickey Spillane's The Long Wait, which is a great book. And I read Ian Fleming, James Bond. But then it was like H.P. Lovecraft and Richard Matheson and Ray Bradbury. Man, Ray Bradbury was a massive influence on me.
That's pure story, man.
Oh,
that guy.
Incredible. When I was don't forget how old I was. Might have been about 12 again. I bought The Illustrated Man, and I was so impressed with it. I drew illustrations of each individual, like there's the Velt and the Illustrated. I drew a whole big page. I loved that. The Illustrated Man. And then Josh Kirby, the guy who actually illustrated the covers, the guy called Josh Kirby who's illustrated the covers. But then, it's like Rod Serling, Twilight Zone, and Ray Harryhausen and Orson Welles and Kiss Me Deadly and massive. Yeah. All that stuff is like, it's like in me. Yeah, of course. And it's like, and that's what makes me what I am. But the whole thing about the dark bit, I did. Well, this has not been published in English. I want to get it published in English. I did a retrospective collection of my short stories with different people: Ramsey Campbell, Pete Milligan, Steve Bissett, all little horror stories, short horror stories, and some of my stories, science fiction stories, a whole mix. And in that, I tried to explain why I think I've got this thing. But the one in the introduction to it, I say, well, this is kind of relevant. I don't know where this comes from. When I was 15, I must think it was about 15, my mother asked me what I wanted as a Christmas present. And I said, the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft and Demonology. Now I don't know where that came from, but it was all because I was fascinated by this dark world that was dark but also colourful. And if you're brought up in England in the 50s, it's very grey. Very grey. The 60s.
You're still post-war. You're still building.
Rebuilding. God. Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I went to, when I was employed at that advertising studio, there was still a bomb site. There was still.
I think people just don't get that.
No.
There are people for whom London had these gaps in its teeth, that there were blocks that were leveled.
Absolutely. Ludgate Circus. There was like. Yeah, it was like there was still a bomb site. There was nothing there. It hadn't been built on them. It was like extraordinary. But it was very grey. But in the 50s. But by the time I actually joined the studio, we were past that period. We were in the Beatles, Stones. That was that golden psychedelia. Mm-hmm. That was a fabulous
Did you
time.
have the giant sideburns and everything? Did you play along that?
No, I had more hair then. But I mean, I didn't have. No, in fact, I was very. I was not. I did want to join that. There was a part of me that wanted to join that whole thing, but I was kind of like, I was very shy when I was a teenager. It took me a long time to sort of like break out of that.
Yeah.
But above all that, I was very dedicated to what I wanted to do, and I mean, I've just always been driven. If I want to do something, I'll do it. And that was really the thing that drove me. It was the thing that really drove me. So I wasn't, but I could see it and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole spirit of it, I mean, I was in Colombia just before this. I did 3 trips. I was linked. I was in Barcelona, and one of the helpers there, Nicole, I was selling her on Small Faces, and because she knew something about British pop, and we were talking about the time when Britain was at its most, the different periods when it was at its most potent. Mm-hmm. So it was like the 60s. And then it was the 70s during punk, and then later on when you got Oasis. But there was like those three. Yeah. There was those three. 3 periods, interspersed by sort of like disco and stuff. But the 60s were the best, and then you had punk, which is Clash and stuff like that. So she knew about all that, but she didn't know too much about. So I sent her some Small Faces, and she loves it, and it's great, and it's really nice. It's really nice when you get that, because it's like it's classic, it's classical stuff.
You realize this is 50 years now.
Yeah, and it's still potent. It has that energy is just extraordinary, and also because the important thing was very British, very English, and very working class, and that is very unusual. There was a bit.
I was going to ask if your class and upbringing also kind of precluded you from fitting into that world, or if it was,
Which world?
When you talk about the psychedelia and all this stuff.
But most of that was working class.
I wasn't sure.
Everybody was out of their heads.
Gotcha.
Out of their heads, and they were all working class. I don't think. Obviously the middle classes and upper classes, obviously flirted with that as well.
Yeah, but they were.
That was all. That was all part of the. That was all part of the. When I was at school, people were talking about Purple Hearts. When I was in high school here, but no, that was all part of it. But as I say, I never got into that. And I was never. In fact, drugs didn't have much attraction for me at all. I didn't even start drinking until I was about 29. So I never even drank until I was about 29. And even then, it was because I really needed a social lubricant. Yeah. But I don't know. But as I say, I love being part of that period because it was part of me. It washed over me, and it's really relevant to those things. Just influence you completely. But I was on a different kind of track. I was like, I loved the Beatles, but I loved jazz. I loved jazz, New York jazz and stuff. And one of my major influences from a artistic point of view is soundtracks.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Mission Impossible, a TV show.
Lalo Schifrin? Yeah.
You know this. Man.
That's unforgettable. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I actually got that album. And it wasn't on sale in England. You have to buy it
I've talked about that with people, that once upon a time, you couldn't just download or stream everything. You actually had to, order something or have a friend who was going to I had this with Thomas Dolby. A friend of mine was going to Berlin back in college, and I said, okay, here's $20. Get the Flat Earth on CD and bring that back here, because you can't buy it in the U.S. Yeah. This is alien to people younger than us. They don't get that there were once imports and borders and,
Yeah, but it was like, well, I mean, this is the one thing I hate that comics are collectible.
Yeah.
Because it's stopping me from progressing and getting the great medium out to people.
Mm-hmm.
But
the plus side,
there is something to be said to getting an import album from America, which had cellophane around it.
Yeah.
English albums didn't have that. English record albums never had cellophane around them.
Really?
But no, American albums, and they had cellophane around them. You had to split it, and they go, man, it was just great. And especially if you couldn't get them over here.
Yeah.
And at that time, this is 66. It was 66 around that time. That's what I was into. And I was also, I got a American record catalogue. I forget where I got that. Which had lists of all the soundtracks that you could get, which you couldn't get in England. It had soundtracks of Peter Gunn and stuff like that. Well, it didn't have that. It's like this was Henry Mancini. This is like, it's another fantastic soundtrack. But I was really into that stuff because I think that was the dramatic thing. See, that's what always feeds into me. Yeah. It's, okay, so great pop, and that was good. But the dramatic of the soundtrack album, and then Planet of the Apes. Man, that soundtrack is just... Have you got Planet of the Apes?
No, that one I don't know. I don't remember...
It's Jerry Goldsmith. Do you know Jerry Goldsmith?
No.
Oh, man, Jerry Goldsmith. He's one of the finest...
That would I gotta look up.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
He did... but he would do really heavy stuff, like Patch of Blue and Sand Pebbles. Sand Pebbles is incredible. That movie, the Sand Pebbles. He would do that, and then would do Planet of the Apes, and then would do poppy kind of stuff like Owlman Flynn. I
remember James Coburn. Yeah.
Just incredible. They were fantastic. Mm-hmm. And around about that time, he had Jerry Fielding too. Did Wild Bunch.
Yeah.
Just incredible stuff.
So that sort of thing created the sort of the background for, how you were telling, what you were trying, in a sense, to replicate in stories? Or just in terms of, that sort of music was part of the mix
I used to play that in the background when I was drawing.
Yeah.
I'd have the album, then I'd put it on a tape reel, and I'd play that while I was drawing. So it was like a background. And also actually TV shows. I'd actually tape TV shows, like The Prisoner.
Yeah.
And I'd run that stuff in the background. So, but all that stuff was like, it's like being fed.
Yeah.
It's like being fed. You don't do it deliberately, but I think you do it because you need it. There's you're kind of absorbing, I don't know. What's that thing in Star Trek that used to eat planets? It was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
8 planets. Not the Doomsday Machine. What's it called? It was called the Doomsday Machine, I think. Big thing.
That one took over the Starship. But I know the episode you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's called Doomsday Machine. It just goes.
Yeah.
It just eats planets, and I think we eat planets even when we're just going around, we're feeding on them, and it becomes part of what you are.
Yeah.
And but that's what I mean. All that stuff was like great. I mean, the irony is I don't listen to any music at all anymore.
Yeah.
No, I don't, because I have to think so much.
Yeah.
I
can't listen to anything with words. I can do non-vocal music when I'm working, but I can't have anything with words because I can't focus at all if I hear other people, singing or speaking.
No.
But it's also because I'm a monstrous egotist, but that's neither here nor there. The weird question, which is a meta question for you, is this the longest interview you've done where Alan Moore and V for Vendetta haven't really come up? Because I kept thinking, oh, yeah, we'll discuss V at some point. I realized we're almost 2 hours and we've never actually mentioned V. Is that something you're happy with? Is it?
Oh,
nice,
yeah. I'm.
You talked out on the subject?
No, I don't. You can ask me whatever you like, and it's up to you how long you want to talk. I mean,
No, it's just funny to me that, I kept coming in thinking, well, I'm not sure what we'll discuss, but I we could always just focus on V and go from there. I like the fact that we've done all this without really talking about, the thing you're best known for in the States.
Well, you know what your listeners are going to be interested in. That's the thing, and I'm.
It's all about what I'm interested in. That's why I like just hearing you and your life. And
oh, right, okay.
Although actually, the real question, to stay away from V yet again, do you regret the not going to art school? I know you.
I regret it from one point of view. That's a social point of view.
That the connections would have helped. Just knowing artists?
Absolutely. No, just socially. I don't actually think, well, I've heard lots of stories about people who were kind of steered away from naturalistic, realistic art into kind of abstract or conceptual stuff.
That era especially, yeah.
66, whatever. But I regret that I didn't have the social aspect because, as I told you, I was kind of very shy and I wouldn't say introvert. Well, I mean, I was just shy.
Yeah.
What could you do?
I just wonder when you mentioned Bolton coming out of art school, is it the sort of thing you thought, man, if I'd gone to art school, maybe I, would have been able to fine tune this better, or I would have tackled that a little more easily than.
I don't know. I mean, the interesting thing is, I don't know how much freedom. You were given. It depended on the in English art school. I think it's changed a bit now, but there are two different courses you can go on. You can go on a foundation course, which gives you all the stuff like a bit of illustration and then conceptual and figure drawing and shit, and the possibility of abstract, conceptual, blah blah blah. And then an illustration course, which is much more geared towards actual illustration, realistic portrayal. I don't know where I would have gone. I don't know. But considering the fact that I managed to teach myself and that I was natural in terms of storytelling, for me, if you're asking about regret, it's a regret about the social thing. Because I would have liked to have been part of, the socialized area of art school. And I do regret that. That's the only thing that I think I could have missed. But then when I look on that, I think, well, if I had, would I have gone down another path?
Yeah.
So, everything, the thing about life is like you go down the fork, because you're forced to go down a fork, and then you're in a better place than the fork in the road that you thought you'd be better off. But you never know that. I mean, that's life. I mean, you don't know.
It's not an experiment. You can't run a control group against it. So.
No, you can't. That's fate.
There's a question I have from Dave McKean, who I recorded with last fall.
Oh, he gave you a question.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I zapped him this morning and just said, it's short notice, but I'll be recording with David Lloyd. Do you have anything?
Right.
Since we now know that the internet and cyberspace are pure evil, why hasn't David recanted and returned to print books yet?
Well,
I assume that's an ongoing thing with you guys. And
well, no, I mean, I've never discussed anything with Dave about that, but I think he's just being mischievous, isn't he?
Yeah, that has
I think he's just being mischievous.
Yeah. But since we may as well make sure we get a little V conversation in, can you talk a little about that experience starting V for Vendetta in the UK and then completing it in the US, and sort of what it meant for your career when it became a hit in America in the early 90s?
Well, that's a long story. I mean, Do you want to keep this to some sort of length? This
yeah, if you have a truncated version of it, or if you just have one area you want to focus on.
No, I'm just wondering if you said we've been talking for 2 hours.
I ran a 3-hour one with Jerry Moriarty a couple of weeks ago that almost killed me because it was a 3-hour drive up to his place. We went on for 3 hours, and then I had to drive home that evening. So,
right,
this is.
Oh,
fine.
You do? Yeah. You've got to leave at some point. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want me to talk about V from its beginnings, and how it happened?
If you want to talk just about, the impact it had on your career, I suppose, what it meant to, have that sort of hit.
Okay. Right.
And what it was in the UK before. I know it ended
Okay. All right. Let me see if I can follow your thread. Every artist who's successful, who actually gets a reputation in this business, needs a following. You need something that gives you a following. Now, the beginnings of my following came with Night Raven, which is a story I did for Marvel UK. I don't know whether you want me to describe the comic or whatever. I don't know how educated all your readers will be. But anyway, your listeners will be.
Yes.
Marvel UK produced a comic called Hulk Weekly. And it was initiated because the Incredible Hulk TV series was being launched in England for the first time. Now, the nature of this comic was very much like British comics at that time. It's very cheap newsprint, an anthology. All kinds of different stories. So you'd have a science fiction story, a jungle gym type story, whatever. That's what British comics were like at that period. We're talking 79.
Yeah,
okay?
I was going to say late 70s.
Now, the editor of that, who had convinced Marvel UK to do this idea, to have a comic that was like a Marvel comic that was like a British comic, because before that, Marvel UK comics were like reprints.
Yeah, I remember that. I'd go over to England and we would just get reprints of US comics.
Yeah, Planet of the Apes and stuff like that. Right. TV thing. Okay. So this was the first time they'd actually switched over to a British comic book, weekly comic form. And it happened because they were convinced to do that by a guy called Des Skin, who was the editor of and he made a reputation. He'd managed to get, being employed by Marvel UK to do this. And anyway, I thought it was just a really smart move, And I'd worked with Des before on a very dark chiaroscuro story. It was an adaptation of a British TV show called Quatermass 2, or a British film called Quatermass 2. It was an adaptation of the movie that had been made of a British TV science fiction serial called Quatermass 2. He knew me from that. He knew that I could do sort of like dark stuff. So he commissioned me to do something called Night Raven. Night Raven was a masked crime fighter fighting gangsters in Prohibition era in America. I did that for Hulk Weekly. And that was the strip that actually got a following for me. People liked it, and it became, I think it became the most popular strip in Hulk Weekly eventually. And so that's, I had a following. People who knew my name and they knew what I was good at and they liked it. So that's the beginning, right? You have to have that. That's important. If you get a reputation, you've got to have something that kickstarts your people's interest in
people
what you
that
do.
ask for it. Yeah.
Okay. And then I worked with Des afterwards when he was still at Marvel UK doing Doctor Who magazine. I was doing stories for him. Anyway, he left Marvel UK eventually and set up his own magazine called Warrior. Warrior was a British independent comic magazine he set up. And when he set that up, he wanted to employ a lot of the people who'd worked with him on Hulk Weekly. It's like Steve Dillon and me and Alan and stuff like that. So the idea was for me to do a similar character to the one I'd successfully done in Hulk Weekly, a masked vigilante character. And that was the brief. That was the brief that I was given for that. Can you do a masked vigilante character like V for Vendetta, like
Night Raven.
Like Night Raven for Warrior? And the initial plan was for me to write and draw the whole thing. Well, I'd been working with this genius called Alan Moore, and I was smart enough to realize that it would be much better if I worked with Alan on it. And in fact, effectively, Alan was already on board with Warrior because he was doing an update of Marvel Man with Gary Leach. So he was already in the picture. And I spoke to Alan about it. I said, do you want to come? He said, yep, sounds like a good idea. And we both ended up doing V for Vendetta like that. And
were the scripts as crazy as having seen some of his scripts from
now I'm glad you asked me that question.
The Eddie and Gibbons
stuff. You see,
done.
I am very glad you asked me that question because that is the question that I'm always asked. What's it like to work with Alan Moore? And I get that question. and I have to tell people, and it's almost gets kind of boring, that I never had scripts like that at all.
Right.
And if I had scripts like that, if he'd have tried to write scripts like that, I would never have worked with him.
Yeah.
Alan, I think I was the very first person that Alan worked with on a collaborative basis, apart from Gary, who was doing Marvel Man 4. And he had not developed those sorts of techniques. And in fact, but he started to overwrite when I was working with him.
Yeah.
And I stopped him. And we laughed about it. We joked about it. But I stopped him doing that. And I did it because I just knew he was overwriting. And it wasn't what I wanted.
In terms of over-scripting or over-commanding you? I mean, in terms
over-scripting is exactly the same thing.
No, I mean characters and exposition speaking too much or giving you too much instruction per panel.
Oh no, it's too much inscription. No, it isn't. Not relevant to the. Not relevant to the. No, not relevant to the dialogues. Yeah. I mean, Alan has always been smart enough not to have.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
I mean, he's not writing. You know, some writers put lots of stuff in their balloons. He never has. He's a smart enough writer not to do that.
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
Sure, yes.
I'm talking about the exposition. I'm talking about the instruction. And I stopped him. But you see, you got to remember that we were friends. We were doing. Yeah. We were on the same wavelengths. We were telling the same story. We were telling the story that we wanted to. And it was early days. This was early days. If you give somebody power to write exactly what they want to write without any editorial control, with complete freedom, they will do it. Now, that's up to the writers, the artists, whether they want to do that. And I have very strong views about the territory of the artist and the writer in a collaborative comic strip.
Yeah,
it's very, very important. And if an artist is happy to detail everything that is given to them by the writer, well, that's up to them. But I don't think it's a healthy situation, and I think it's problematic in terms of the creative credits that will ever be applied to it, and so I don't think it's a good idea, and I wouldn't work with anyone on that level, and so but as I say, the situation didn't rise. But every time I'm asked a question about what's it like to work with Alan Moore, I know where it's coming from. It's always like that stuff. oh wow, it's like wow, and in fact sometimes it comes from people who think, well, he's a bit kind of crazy and eccentric, so
therefore
I want to know what it's like. But so whenever I ask that question, I said, well, why are you asking that question? And sometimes I will say, and then they'll come back and say, well, I've seen all those, intricate scripts. And I have to say, well, I never had that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Again, if you either it was early enough in your career or the two of you were comfortable enough with each other, A, that you didn't have to, and B, that you could tell them, hey, just lighten up.
That's the thing. You see, I think the problem now is that Alan has got some enormous reputation. He's like a god. People look at him as like kind of a god. Now, he is incredible. He's a genius. I don't know any writer like him. He's, incredible. But people just respect him on such a degree now. I mean, I remember him saying at one point, and I can't remember when, he really wanted somebody to edit him. He wanted an editor at DC. Because everybody was like, I guess, because everybody was afraid to do it.
Yeah, the script.
Nobody wanted to do that because, it's like, my God, the great Alan Moore, which is, and that's a terrible, that's a terrible burden because it means, you've got no backstop. I mean, everybody needs a backstop. Everybody, nobody's perfect. I mean, nobody's perfect.
Right.
And, but I guess for a long time he's had nobody's saying that. But anyway, the point is that we were fresh. I was just 3 years into the business. Alan was just 2 years into the business.
Yeah. So
we were newbies, and I was the first person he collaborated with, let's say, apart from Gary, and it didn't last well. V was the ongoing strip in Warrior. We never had any breaks. Whereas Marvel Man, Gary was on it for a couple of weeks, couple of months. And then because he's a great, fantastic artist, Gary, but he's slow. So he couldn't get on. And then you had Alan Davis and blah, blah, blah. But we were doing that, and it was like a complete commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both working happily from the same song sheet, hymn sheet.
And it just, Warrior closed down. They decided after Alan made his reputation in the U.S. to bring it over here and complete it.
Yeah, well, that's basically what happened. I mean, Warrior ran out of money and had to finish. And in that gap, or just before that gap, or at the same time as that gap, Alan was working with DC, made this incredible debut with Swamp Thing. And, it was like they were looking, but I think, you have to remember that Karen Berger and Dick Giordano were fans of V from way back, and they were the natural...
let's bring it here and finish the story.
Yeah, bring it here and finish the story, and that's what happened, yeah.
Were you happy with the audience it built for you in the U.S.? Was it important in terms of advancing your career, or do you think you could have kept going just fine in the UK?
Well,
given that a lot of the writers you worked with are UK.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether the only really important comic magazine in the UK that I might have done stuff for, although they didn't want me to, really, was 2000 AD. I didn't really fit into their mindset. I didn't really fit into what they were doing. They always seemed like a different crowd, They were like, and so I never thought I don't know what I'd do. I would have ended up working in America for something, but I never really thought about that. I never thought that it would be I need to collapse. I never thought about that. I mean, it was just like an ongoing situation.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was, I didn't think I'd ever have any trouble. I mean, during the period before we did V, I was commissioned by DC to do stuff like Wasteland and things like that.
That Ostrander and Del Close.
Yeah. And I did I was doing short stories for Eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought my reputation was already formed anyway.
Yeah.
Then I could have done anything in America if I wanted to, at some point. So I was never really concerned about the
what it would have meant. Yeah, as a
but if I'd just been stuck with British comics, it might have been a very interesting situation if no American company was interested in me, because I don't know what I would have done at 2000 AD, but it never arose. It never occurred to me.
Real last question. The mask from V for Vendetta, the Guy Fawkes stylized mask that he wears, became a thing here in the U.S. during the Occupy era, 2008, 2009. Subsequently became overexposed in every way, to the point at which when I pass my local bar, there is a Guy Fawkes mask for Revolution Trivia Night. What does it feel when you were seeing that staring back at you in that first in that Occupy zone, and then as it's kind of spread out throughout the culture? What was your reaction?
I just think it's great. I mean, what can I say about it? I mean, I just think it's wonderful. I mean, I think the first time I saw that it had been used, somebody sent me a clipping from, I think it was a Scientology demonstration, anti-Scientology demonstration. Somebody had used it. So, wow, okay. Interesting. And then it just, gradually I saw it being used more. But I think it's great. I'm really, really great. Pleased that it's become this icon of protest and resistance to tyranny. I mean, that's great. I mean, even if it's a perception of tyranny, that they can use that image that represents, protest against oppression is like fantastic. And I don't know how long it'll last. I mean, I hope that it really, it makes a difference. And, I think it's fantastic. Some people oft ask me that about the mask, because they have viewpoints about either Occupy or Anonymous, what they're good or bad. But the thing is that everybody's using that. I mean, from the guy, protesting in some small protest somewhere, wherever, in whatever, or a big protest, wherever it is throughout the globe, because it's used everywhere, to Occupy and Anonymous, they're all using that as a symbol of what they're trying to do, fighting their tyranny,
authority,
their oppression. But the point is, whether they're doing it to the tastes of various people who have different viewpoints about what you should do and what you shouldn't do in claiming for justice, they're doing the best they can in the way they think is working best, and they're doing it from good intentions. And so I just think it's great, and I'm very happy to have been able to been part of that. And especially when, from an artistic point of view, you create something that's comes right out of the pages.
That's what I was wondering.
Into real life. Yeah. It's extraordinary, and I don't think. Well, in fact, I don't think there's been an example of it that we can see. I mean, I guess the closest that has actually been corrupted now is the term Big Brother, because when George Orwell wrote, thought of Big Brother, for like decades, everybody said, "Oh, Big Brother is watching you." It was like, "Oh yeah, that's it." It was like the surveillance society that you can, it's the police state. But once they made that stupid reality TV show,
it became the silly Big Brother.
Yeah. Now everybody thinks about, whenever you say about Big Brother, you either think about Celebrity Big Brother or some other moronic moronic thing. So, you know, hopefully the mask will not be corrupted by such insanity. But no, it's great.
Understood. David, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for asking me.
And that was David Lloyd. You can find out more about him and his work at lforlloyd.com, which is LFORLLOYD.com. That's also his Twitter feed, L for Lloyd. But you really ought to check out the website for Aces Weekly, the online comics anthology that David publishes. Aces Weekly features a ton of great comics talent, and it really is a neat distribution model like David was describing. So you can check that out at acesweekly.co.uk. And that's ACESWEEKLY.co.uk. There's also a presence at facebook.com/acesweekly. And again, just look up Aces Weekly. This will be the thing that comes up. It's carried by Comixology, which is part of Amazon. And there are a couple of other ways to get a hold of it, but check it out. Look at who's providing strips for it. If you're a comics fan, I think you'll dig it. After we wrapped, I asked David, so, who you reading? And if you want to hear his answer to that question, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show and get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The newest episode of that one just went live, and it features book recommendations from last quarter's Virtual Memories Show guests, including Stephen Heller, Dean Haspiel, Jaime Hernandez, J.J. Settlemeyer, Michael Kupperman, Ilana Meyer, Christopher Brown, Irvin Ungar, Alberto Manguel, Chris Reynolds, and Dave Calver. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including that bonus podcast, patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, my secret project that I'm really close to finishing, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. Now, I recorded this episode as part of a batshit crazy 4 podcasts in 3 boroughs of New York day. David was the final guest and the second of 2 in Manhattan. The whole day involved a bunch of toll bridges, about $16 in parking, 2 subway trips, and a lot of driving, along with some coffee breaks. So if you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or just toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. Special thanks go out to Joe Caruso, Michael Hacker, Michael Janizek, Paul Karasik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Jack Lescamella, Teresa Lewis, Andrew Mason, Stephen Nadler, Payne Prophet, Dmitry Samarov, Stephen Solomon, Craig P. Steffen, Greg Tanner, Ford Thomas, Noah Van Skyver, and Garrett Zecker for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thank you so much for listening. I don't have a guest lined up for next week's show. It kind of happened all of a sudden, partly because I lost 2 guests that I was supposed to record with at ReaderCon. Anyway, I might finally take a week off. You'll have to come back and find out. Till then, you can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, at facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, TuneIn, and Spotify by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. That'll help us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.